Hi, this is Brian Reed, the ELD Specialist TOSA for Springfield Public Schools. The professional learning objective for this week is participants will reflect on how they might apply universal design for learning principles while developing learning objectives and anticipating student barriers to access as part of their lesson planning for learning grids. The essential questions for professional learning are: how might you apply UDL principles in planning the learning for students? And what potential barriers to your students' learning do you anticipate? This video addresses the UDL principle of clarity of lesson objectives while making room for multiple options for how students do and express their learning. The trick is to clarify an objective that is both specific and open to multiple ways of learning. Let's look at an example from the IRIS module, option 1 on this week's PD learning grid. It presents a traditional learning objective. Students will read the textbook chapter about ancient Egypt and write in cursive a 500-word report about burial customs. This goal represents barriers in all three networks addressed in the UDL guidelines: engagement, representation, and action and expression. Engagement issues are not addressed in this traditional objective. The representation barriers in the traditional objective are printed text. Some students with certain visual impairments and certain physical disabilities may have difficulty accessing information. Some students may struggle with decoding the text. The action and expression barriers are writing a 500-word report. Some students may have difficulty with cursive handwriting. Some students may not be able to effectively organize their thoughts and put them on paper to create a report of this length. The problem is that this learning objective limits the means by which students can achieve the goal. I anticipate barriers with this objective. Let's look at a learning objective that uses UDL principles. We'll keep the original learning goal, which addresses the content we want students to learn, but we will ask ourselves a series of questions to ensure that we are lowering barriers to student access. So, as I'm planning, the first question is my objective clear and specific? Then, have I separated the primary goal from the other parts of the lesson, like how they represent their learning and how I assess for learning? Here's the learning goal that emerged from this process. The students will learn about and present information about the burial customs of ancient Egypt. This goal is clear and specific. Many of you who have attended our RBT Red Book training know the importance of having a clear learning objective. So at each step in planning, I will ensure that the instruction I'm designing supports the learning objective. Now I need to anticipate barriers that might make it difficult for students to reach the learning goal. As I anticipate potential barriers around engagement, I need to ask, do the strategies I've chosen support the range of my students' interest, effort, and self-regulation? After considering UDL principles, engagement barriers are addressed in giving options in how students choose to access the content and how they demonstrate their knowledge. Students will complete the assignment in accordance with their learning need or preference, i.e., visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic. As I anticipate possible barriers to representation, such as background knowledge or vocabulary, I might ask myself, do the strategies I chose support the range of my students' perception, language and symbol knowledge, and comprehension? After considering these principles of representation, students are still required to learn about the burial customs of ancient Egypt, but they are now encouraged to use alternate methods for accessing that information, such as Google Read and Write, audiobooks, digital text, internet, or video. As I anticipate potential barriers to action and expression, I need to ask, Do the strategies I chose support the range of my students' physical action, expression and communication, and executive function? After considering these principles of action and expression, students still need to demonstrate that they learned about the burial customs of ancient Egypt, but now we have options for doing so. Example, handwriting a report, making a video, recording a presentation, using a diorama, or producing a fantastic rap song. Planning with UDL principles involves setting a clear objective without limiting the ways that students can gain or express their knowledge. The UDL barrier identification video, which is the second resource linked in this week's learning grid, presents a flowchart that mirrors the process I've just shared with you, including clarifying your learning objective and anticipating barriers to learning. The packet featured in the video is a great resource for navigating and troubleshooting around barriers to student access to learning. Thank you for your attention. Upwards and onwards, amigos.